The warning sirens screamed through every corridor of Station Kepler-7 as something impossible happened in the main docking bay. One moment the massive space was empty, filled only with cargo containers and repair equipment. The next moment, a creature from nightmares stood 30 feet tall in the center, its body made of what looked like living crystal that pulsed with strange, colorful lights. Damon Williams was mopping the floor in Section C when the emergency alert started blasting. He dropped his mop and rushed toward the observation deck like everyone else, but what he saw made his blood run cold. The thing was huge, bigger than any Earth elephant, with skin that seemed to shift between transparent and solid. Lights danced under its surface like trapped lightning, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. The elite Vorthan warriors were the first to respond. These weren't ordinary soldiers, they wore powered armor that could punch through starship hulls and carried plasma rifles that could melt steel. But when they opened fire on the creature, something terrifying happened. The energy blast simply passed right through its body as if it wasn't even there. The warriors' confident shouts turned to confused orders, then panicked screams as they retreated. Commander Thex's voice boomed over the intercom system, his usually calm tone cracking with stress. All personnel evacuate sections 7 through 12 immediately. This is not a drill. Security teams establish a perimeter at safe distance. Science teams prepare for emergency analysis. But the creature wasn't attacking anyone. It just stood there, turning its massive head slowly from side to side like it was looking for something. Or someone. When it opened what might have been its mouth, a sound came out that made every person on the station feel it in their bones. It wasn't quite a roar or a scream, more like the deep, mournful call of a whale lost in an endless ocean. Damon pressed his face against the reinforced viewing window and watched as the station's most experienced diplomats tried to approach the beast. Ambassador Corvex from the Centauri delegation took exactly 3 steps into the bay before his translator device started smoking and sparking. The creature's subsonic calls were somehow interfering with all their technology. Even the universal translators that let different species communicate were going haywire. Dr. Vex, the station's head xenobiologist, arrived with a team of scientists carrying every scanner and sensor they owned. They set up their equipment at what they thought was a safe distance, but even from hundreds of feet away, their readings made no sense. The creature's energy signature was unlike anything in their databases. It was old, not just old, but ancient in a way that made their instruments struggle to calculate its age. The evacuation continued for hours as more people fled to the outer sections of the station. Families grabbed what they could carry. Shop owners abandoned their businesses. Even the tough cargo workers who claimed nothing scared them were packing up and heading for the transport ships. But Damon stayed. Something about the creature fascinated him in a way he couldn't explain. While others saw a monster, he saw something else in those strange, glowing eyes. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe it was confusion. The beast kept making those whale-like sounds, and each time it did, the lights under its crystal skin would dim just a little bit more. As night fell on the station, or what passed for night in the artificial day cycle they maintained, Damon noticed something nobody else had seen. The creature's bioluminescent patterns were changing. During the busy day hours when people were running around and shouting, the lights were bright and chaotic. But now, as the station grew quiet, they were settling into a slower, gentler rhythm. The beast lowered its massive head and made a different sound, not the bone-deep calls from before, but something softer. Almost musical. It reminded Damon of something his grandmother used to hum when she was baking cornbread in her little kitchen back on Earth. The memory hit him so hard he had to sit down right there on the observation deck floor. Military ships were already approaching the station. Damon could see their lights through the viewing ports as they took defensive positions. Tomorrow would bring more weapons, more soldiers, more attempts to destroy or capture the creature. But tonight, it was just him and this lonely giant, separated by reinforced glass and fear. In his janitor's uniform, with his simple lunch bag still clutched in his hands, Damon made a decision that would change everything. But that would have to wait until tomorrow, when the real test of courage would begin. 3 days had passed since the creature first appeared, and Station Kepler-7 felt like a ghost town. The main docking bay remained sealed off while the massive crystal beast stood perfectly still in its center, like some kind of living statue that occasionally breathed. But Damon Williams knew it wasn't a statue at all. He'd been watching it every chance he got, and he'd seen things that made his heart ache. The military reinforcements had arrived that morning, 5 warships carrying enough firepower to level a small moon. Admiral Corex himself had come aboard, a battle-scarred veteran who'd fought in 3 galactic wars. His soldiers moved through the station like they owned it, setting up weapon emplacements and energy barriers. They brought experimental plasma cannons that hummed with deadly power, devices that could supposedly punch through any known material in the universe. But the scientists were getting worried. Dr. Vex had been running scans around the clock, and her team looked more exhausted each day. The creature's energy readings kept fluctuating in ways that made no sense. Sometimes it seemed completely solid, other times their instruments detected it was barely there at all. Worse yet, the lights under its crystal skin were getting dimmer with each passing hour. It might be dying, Dr. Vex announced during the emergency briefing that Damon overheard while cleaning the conference room. Her voice was tired and frustrated. We don't understand its biology well enough to know what it needs to survive. For all we know, our atmosphere could be poisoning it. Commander Thex slammed his fist on the table. Then let it die. We can study the corpse without risking everyone's lives. But other voices disagreed. The station's cultural anthropologist, a wise old Altrian named Professor Zenk, had been researching ancient texts from dozens of civilizations. What he'd found made everyone uncomfortable. Almost every spacefaring race had legends about creatures like this one. They called them different names, Void Shepherds, Star Guardians, the Ancient Watchers, but the stories were remarkably similar. According to these texts, Professor Zenk explained, these beings were once common throughout the galaxy. They helped young civilizations develop space travel and peaceful contact with other species. But they vanished thousands of years ago. No one knows why. Damon listened from the hallway while pretending to empty trash cans. The old professor's words made him think about the creature's behavior. It wasn't acting like a monster or an invader. It was acting like something that was looking for something it had lost. During his night shifts, when most of the station slept and only essential personnel remained awake, Damon would find excuses to walk past the observation windows. The creature was different in the quiet hours. Its movements were slower, more careful. Sometimes it would turn its massive head toward the windows as if it knew someone was watching. And those sounds it made, they weren't the harsh calls from that first day. They were softer now, almost like singing. The most heartbreaking part was how the beast responded to the station's artificial day and night cycle. During the busy day hours, when people were running around and machines were humming, its lights would pulse frantically. But as evening approached and the corridors grew quiet, those same lights would fade to a gentle glow. It was like watching someone's hope slowly dying. On the third night, something happened that changed everything for Damon. He was cleaning the upper observation deck around midnight when he heard it, a sound so beautiful and sad it brought tears to his eyes. The creature was singing. There was no other word for it. The deep, melodious notes echoed through the empty docking bay like a lullaby from another world. Damon pressed his forehead against the cold viewing window and really looked at the creature for the first time. Not as a monster or a threat, but as a living being that might be just as scared and confused as everyone else. Its crystal skin was almost transparent now, and he could see some kind of internal structure that pulsed gently like a heartbeat. This wasn't some mindless beast. This was someone who was alone and far from home. The next morning brought more bad news. The military had decided to test their new weapons. Admiral Corex announced they would begin controlled aggression protocols to determine the creature's defensive capabilities. Translation: they were going to shoot it and see what happened. Damon felt sick to his stomach as he watched them prepare their equipment. All those legends Professor Zenk had found talked about these creatures helping civilizations grow and learn. What if this one had come here hoping for the same thing? What if it was trying to help them, and they were planning to repay that kindness with violence? That's when Damon made his decision. He couldn't let this happen without trying something different first. The fourth night arrived with the weight of impending disaster. Admiral Corex had scheduled the weapon tests for dawn, giving his soldiers just a few more hours to calibrate their experimental plasma cannons. Damon Williams couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the creature's sad songs echoing through the empty corridors, and how its lights had grown so dim they barely flickered anymore. At 2 a.m, Damon made the craziest decision of his life. He grabbed his lunch bag from the staff refrigerator, the same simple meal he'd been carrying for years. Inside was half a loaf of cornbread his grandmother had taught him to make, wrapped in old-fashioned wax paper. His hands shook as he stared at it. This was insane. Everyone with military training and advanced degrees had failed to communicate with this creature, and here he was, a janitor from Detroit, thinking a piece of cornbread might make a difference. But something deep in his gut told him it was worth trying. Security was focused on the main entrances to the docking bay, watching for any sign the creature might try to escape or attack. Nobody paid attention to the maintenance hatches that Damon knew better than anyone. He'd been cleaning this station for 3 years, crawling through every service tunnel and access panel to fix broken equipment. Getting into the bay undetected was the easy part. What came next terrified him. The service hatch opened with a soft hiss, and suddenly Damon was standing inside the massive docking bay with nothing between him and the 30-foot crystal giant. The creature's head turned toward him immediately, those strange, glowing eyes focusing on this small human who had dared to enter its space. Damon's heart hammered so hard he thought it might explode. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but he forced his feet to stay planted. The creature wasn't moving aggressively. If anything, it seemed curious, tilting its massive head like a dog hearing an interesting sound. "Hey there, big guy," Damon whispered, his voice barely audible in the cavernous space. "I know you're probably scared. We all are. But I brought you something." He pulled out the cornbread with trembling hands. The wax paper crinkled loudly in the silence, and the creature's bioluminescent patterns shifted to a brighter blue. Was that interest? Hope? Damon couldn't tell, but something about the color change felt positive. Taking a deep breath, Damon tore off a piece of the bread. It was golden brown and still soft, filled with the love and tradition his grandmother had baked into every loaf. He tossed it gently toward the creature, the small piece landing about 10 feet away on the metal deck. What happened next took Damon's breath away. The creature extended something from its body, not quite an arm, more like a graceful tendril made of the same crystal material. But this appendage moved with incredible delicacy, like fingers picking up a soap bubble. It lifted the piece of cornbread and brought it close to what might have been its face, examining it with the care of a jeweler studying a precious gem. When the creature finally consumed the bread, its entire body erupted in light. Not the dim, fading glow Damon had been watching for days, but brilliant, joyful colors that painted the walls of the docking bay like an aurora. The transformation was so sudden and beautiful that Damon forgot to be afraid. "You like that, huh?" he said, sitting down cross-legged on the cold deck. "My grandma used to make this every Sunday after church. She said food made with love always tastes better than anything you can buy." The creature moved closer, its massive form somehow managing to seem gentle despite its intimidating size. Those whale-like sounds started again, but softer now, almost like a purr. Damon broke off another piece of cornbread and held it out in his palm. The crystal tendril returned, this time coming within inches of Damon's hand. He felt a strange tingling sensation, like static electricity, but warm instead of sharp. The creature carefully lifted the bread from his palm, and for just a moment, Damon swore he felt something else, a presence in his mind, ancient and kind and impossibly lonely. "You've been alone for a long time, haven't you?" Damon said softly. "I get it. Sometimes this big universe can feel pretty empty." He spent the next hour sharing his simple meal and talking to the creature like it was an old friend. He told it about Earth, about his grandmother's small house where she'd raised him after his parents died. He talked about his job on the station, how he'd come here hoping for adventure but mostly just felt invisible. The creature listened to every word, its lights pulsing in rhythm with Damon's voice. And slowly, impossibly, Damon began to understand that this magnificent being had been searching for something across the vast darkness of space. Not conquest or resources or territory. It had been searching for connection. For kindness. For someone who would see it not as a monster, but as a friend. Dawn broke over Station Kepler 7 with chaos erupting in every corridor. Someone had spotted Damon Williams sitting peacefully with the massive crystal creature, sharing what looked like breakfast while the beast's lights danced in happy patterns around them. Within minutes, every alarm on the station was blaring, and security teams were racing toward the docking bay. Commander Thex nearly had a heart attack when he saw the surveillance footage. His night janitor, his quiet, unremarkable night janitor, was having what appeared to be a casual conversation with the most dangerous unknown entity they'd ever encountered. The creature's bioluminescent display was brighter than it had been since its arrival, painting the entire docking bay in shifting rainbows of light. "Get him out of there now!" Thex roared at his security chief. But before anyone could move, Dr. Vex grabbed the commander's arm with surprising strength. "Wait," she said, her scientific mind racing. "Look at the readings. The creature's energy signature has completely stabilized. Its stress indicators have dropped to almost nothing. Whatever your janitor is doing, it's working." Admiral Corex was furious. His carefully planned weapon tests were supposed to begin in 30 minutes, and now some civilian had contaminated the entire operation. He ordered his soldiers to storm the bay and extract Damon immediately, but Commander Thex overruled him. For the first time in days, the creature wasn't showing any signs of distress or aggression. The extraction team made it exactly 5 steps into the docking bay before everything went wrong. The moment armed soldiers appeared, the creature's lights shifted from peaceful blues and greens to alarming reds and oranges. It rose to its full height and let out a sound that rattled every piece of equipment on the station. But it wasn't threatening the soldiers, it was protecting Damon, positioning its massive body between him and the weapons. "Stand down," Thex commanded over the radio. "Everyone back to safe positions immediately." The soldiers retreated, and slowly, gradually, the creature's colors returned to normal. It settled back down next to Damon, who seemed completely unaware of the panic he'd caused. From the observation windows, hundreds of station personnel watched in amazement as the human and the alien continued their impossible breakfast together. That's when Dr. Kessler arrived. The brilliant Centauri xenolinguist had been studying the creature's vocalizations and light patterns for days without success, but seeing them respond to human presence gave her a new idea. She convinced Commander Thex to let her try something unprecedented, using Damon as a communication bridge. "The patterns are changing," Dr. Kessler explained excitedly as she set up her equipment near the observation windows. "When your janitor speaks, the creature's lights pulse in specific sequences. It's not random, there's structure, grammar, meaning. This being is trying to communicate through bioluminescence." Working with Damon through the intercom system, Dr. Kessler began to decode what the creature was trying to say. It took hours of patient work, with Damon asking questions and the creature responding with complex light displays that Dr. Kessler frantically analyzed. Gradually, an incredible story began to emerge. The creature was ancient, older than human civilization, older than most of the species currently living in the galaxy. It belonged to a race that had once traveled between stars not as conquerors or colonizers, but as teachers and guides. They had helped dozens of developing civilizations make the leap from planetary to galactic society, showing them how to build faster-than-light ships and establish peaceful first contact with other species. But something had gone wrong thousands of years ago. The teacher race had vanished almost overnight, leaving behind only legends and myths in the histories of the species they had helped. This creature, it called itself something that Dr. Kessler translated as Shepherd of the Young Stars, had been searching the galaxy ever since, looking for any trace of the civilizations it had once nurtured. The most heartbreaking part came when they realized why the creature had been so drawn to Damon's simple offering of cornbread. The food itself wasn't important, it was what the bread represented. Cooperation between individuals to grow grain. Community working together to harvest and mill it. Generations passing down recipes and traditions. The kind of social bonds and cultural development that the Shepherd's people had once helped foster across the galaxy. It recognized something in humanity, Dr. Kessler explained to the packed briefing room. Not our technology or our weapons, but our capacity for kindness to strangers. The bread was proof that we've learned to take care of each other, to share what we have even with those we don't know. The Shepherd had been alone for millennia, carrying the grief of an entire extinct civilization. But in Damon's simple act of sharing his lunch, it had found something it thought was lost forever. Hope that the lessons its people had tried to teach were still alive somewhere in the universe. Commander Thex made the announcement that changed everything. Damon Williams was being promoted to humanity's first official Shepherd human ambassador. 6 months later, Station Kepler-7 looked nothing like the place where panic had once ruled the corridors. The main docking bay had been transformed into something that took visitors' breath away, a massive garden dome where earth plants grew alongside alien flora from dozens of different worlds. At its center stood the Shepherd, no longer a frightening monster but a beloved teacher whose crystal body caught and reflected sunlight in ways that made the entire space feel magical. Damon Williams barely recognized his own life anymore. The quiet janitor who used to mop floors in solitude was now one of the most important people in the galaxy. Ambassadors from every major civilization came to Station Kepler-7 hoping to meet with the Shepherd, but they all had to go through him first. The ancient being would only communicate directly with Damon, trusting him to translate its wisdom for the rest of the universe. But the most amazing changes weren't political or diplomatic, they were personal. The Shepherd had revealed something that shook the foundations of galactic science. It possessed the ability to awaken dormant psychic abilities in species that were ready for the next stage of evolution. Not through force or manipulation, but through gentle guidance and the kind of deep connection that could only come from genuine trust and friendship. Humanity was the first species the Shepherd had chosen to help in thousands of years, and it wasn't because humans were the strongest fighters or the smartest scientists. It was because a lonely janitor had been willing to share his lunch with a stranger who looked scary and different. The transformation began slowly. Damon started experiencing flashes of insight that helped him understand not just the Shepherd's communications, but the emotions and thoughts of other people around the station. Dr. Kessler discovered she could sense the linguistic patterns of alien languages before her computers finished translating them. Even Commander Thex began having dreams that helped him make better decisions about station security and diplomacy. But the real magic happened in the Garden Dome, where Damon had started teaching cooking classes to anyone who wanted to learn. The idea had come from the Shepherd itself, whose light patterns had suggested that sharing food was one of the most powerful ways to build understanding between different species. Cooking brings people together, Damon explained to his latest class, a mixed group that included a young Vorthan warrior, an elderly Ultrian poet, and 3 human children whose families had recently moved to the station. When you make food for someone, you're telling them they matter to you. He demonstrated how to knead bread dough while the Shepherd watched from nearby, its gentle harmonies filling the air like background music. The alien students struggled with the concept at first. Many of their species had given up traditional food preparation in favor of nutrient tablets and synthetic meals. But as they worked with their hands, mixing ingredients and sharing stories about their home worlds, something beautiful began to happen. The Vorthan warrior, who had been trained from childhood to see other species as potential threats, found himself laughing with a human child as they competed to see who could roll out the flattest bread. The Ultrian poet discovered that the rhythms of kneading dough reminded her of the ancient songs her grandmother used to sing. The human children asked 1,000 questions about alien cooking traditions, their natural curiosity breaking down barriers that had existed for centuries. But the most touching moment came when Keisha, Damon's new assistant and the station's first official ambassador in training, presented her first successful loaf of cornbread to the Shepherd. The ancient being's response was immediate and overwhelming. Its entire body erupted in golden light that brought tears to everyone's eyes. Through Damon, it shared a memory from its distant past, showing them images of its own people teaching young civilizations to cultivate crops and share meals together. The Shepherd had waited thousands of years to see that simple joy again, different species learning from each other, building friendships over shared food, discovering that the things that connected them were stronger than the things that divided them. As word spread throughout the galaxy about the miraculous changes happening on Station Kepler-7, more species began requesting permission to send their young people to learn from the Shepherd. But the ancient being was selective, choosing only those who showed genuine curiosity and kindness rather than ambition for power or knowledge. The station's new motto, suggested by Damon and approved unanimously by the Galactic Council, was simple but profound: growth through understanding, wisdom through sharing. It was painted in dozens of languages on the walls of the Garden Dome, a reminder that the greatest discoveries in the universe often came not from advanced technology or military might, but from the courage to offer friendship to a stranger. And at the heart of it all was a former janitor who had changed the course of galactic history with nothing more than homemade cornbread and an open heart.